It's that time again. Good afternoon to you. This is Musically Speaking. I'm Clyde Mckenzie. And today we have a special program lined up for you. Yes, in studio, I have a man who goes by many, many titles. He is author, businessman, lawyer, public intellectual. He has been described as encyclopedic, brilliant. Those are descriptions with which I find easy agreement. He's my friend. Yes, this man knows a lot about so many things and so much about music. Talking about Wayne Chen. He's here with me today, and we're going to be talking about the state of Jamaican music. Wayne is a man who has written or co-authored a book called Reggae Roots, and he is one who is deep into music, not just reggae, music in general. It is my great pleasure to have Wayne Chen today on Musically Speaking. Wayne, there's so much for us to talk about, and when we talk music, it goes on and on and on and on and on. Today we want to talk about the state of Jamaican music, because you have a slightly contrarian position to the conventional wisdom that the music is really going to pot and that nothing good is happening with the music. Many people point to the developments in trap and music and claim that, these artists can't go beyond Port Royal. You're not one who shares that view. You seem to have a slightly different view. Would you like to explain to me what your views are on this matter? Because you seem to listen to people like Joshi and Chen and Skilly Bang and these people who normally people don't associate with, businessmen, traditional, someone like you. Tell me how you really have a position like that on the music.
Well, Clyde, you know that our conversations go way beyond music, and music is really just an entry point in understanding Jamaica's culture, how we craft our national identity. It is the expression that the world knows us for. It is the best known Jamaican expression of our cultural identity. And living in Jamaica, having lived all my life in Jamaica, I'm naturally a fan of Jamaican music and have followed its development. I tell people, I'm not a historian. I really am an eyewitness. I've lived long enough to see many developments, seen some firsthand, being lucky enough to be there when it was happening. I've seen perhaps all the great Jamaican artists live in concert. I've met quite a few. I've worked with a few. So,
talking about working with a few, I mean, we're going to talk about one with whom you've worked closely. That's Toots.
Yes.
We'll talk about that later, but continue.
So, I try to keep up with the latest trends. So I will always be listening. And in the old days, I would turn up at the record shop and, I'd have my little guy there who would give me all the latest 45s. So I literally have thousands of 45s. Don't ask me where they are today. But nowadays, it's not about that. It's much easier nowadays. I go on YouTube and see what's trending, what's big, who is blowing up, and I get a sense of what is happening in the music. I understand the concerns, and we can talk about that later. But the concerns are not really new. But what I will say is that you have a lot of talented young Jamaican artists who are doing their thing now, and they do have a global audience.
So you think that the argument that the music has no potential and can't go beyond Port Royal is overblown?
There are we can discuss the concerns. There will be concerns. The fact of the matter is, young people are not making music for my generation.
Yeah, they don't make music for us.
No, not at all.
Yes.
And I give a keen ear to what young Jamaicans are listening to. And the fact is that the majority of young Jamaicans, and I say the men in particular, are still listening to Jamaican music. And it comes and goes, There are times they'll be listening to more American music, more R&B, more pop. But our young men are listening to Jamaican music by and large. And our Jamaican artists continue to be influential. And I can talk about the rise of the dancehall scene in Trinidad and Tobago. the influence of Jamaican music on what's happening in London,
Yes.
in West Africa, in North America, how we have influenced contemporary world music, including hip hop, but not limited to hip hop. When Nicki Minaj gave a shout out to King recently on stage in front of tens of millions of viewers, she was making a very shrewd career move, and I don't
Because
think we understand
she knows that Skeng
brings her into a different.
brings her in another dimension.
Absolutely.
That's so important because we are thinking that in the main that maybe there has been a significant decline in terms of the influence of our music. But Wayne is saying, yes, there are reasons for concern perhaps, but in the main, Jamaican artists are still making an impact internationally. And one who has been doing that is Popcorn. You know, he has been making quite an impact
Yes, yes.
internationally. His association with Drake and
Yes.
all of that.
And other artists, mainstream, pop, rock artists.
Yes, he has.
If you look at his collab list, it is a very impressive line.
It's a who's who of
Absolutely.
pop music. One of the stars of the new dispensation, the man called Joshi, he came to public attention really in a big way through an interview on ER. You know, he seemed a little bit out of it at the time, but it had such an impact. You know, he might have been drinking a little bit but at the time, but Joshi has really come into the popular consciousness in a big way, Wayne.
And absolutely. And, you know, dancehall rightfully gets hauled every now and then for the gun lyrics, the scamming lyrics, the misogyny, the promotion of violence. Rightfully so. I'm not going to argue whether society is reflecting dancehall or dancehall is reflecting society. I think they both feed on each other.
Yes.
But often left out of the discussion is there's a lot of positive music coming out of Jamaica too. And I will confess that I find Joshi's song inspirational. I find the Popcorn that we played earlier, Emerita 5. I find a lot of what Coffee does. Protege, even though he's a little bit older, not an old man, but a little older than this generation. You have the 20-somethings making positive music also, and I hear people listening to it.
And I think we should not even categorize people in terms of the genre.
Not at all.
We should basically look to see what the person says on a song by song basis. And many times we're dismissive of artists claiming that you know we just stereotype them, and in point of fact their music represents a range of thoughts and feelings, and we just are hell-bent on restricting and stereotyping people. And I think that is very dangerous, because there are many things that are going on that have escaped our notice because we have on our blinkers.
Absolutely. The fact is that young people are making music for their generation, and as it has always been, it's a mixed bag. There's the good, the bad, and the ugly. And the fact is, there's a lot of ugly, there's a lot of bad, but there's also good that is worth celebrating. And if we want more good, we have to create that supportive infrastructure, that supportive ecosystem, ultimately that supportive society that makes the market for better music, that makes our artists more literate in the sense that they can better articulate in music and in words.
And that brings us to a very important juncture here, Wayne. And that's the whole question of training and music appreciation, raising the level of music appreciation. I know there have been discussions recently about the proposal from the Prime Minister about establishing schools for music and so on. And it has been controversial. But I think it's important for us to understand that if we're talking about uplifting the quality of music generally, we have to increase the level of music appreciation, where the audience will be more demanding, and also those who are producing and creating the music will be at a certain standard. They will know when they're on key, and they will know how to basically
Many things.
Yeah.
They will have more tools at their disposal.
Yes.
Whether it is voice training, whether it's training in the use of the instruments, more important, increasingly more important, the use of the software, the use of mixing technology, and so on and so forth. It's an ongoing scandal in this country, and it's something I've spoken about for over 30 years. That, given my first statement on your program today, Clyde, that our music is Jamaica's greatest statement to the rest of the world. That every school in Jamaica, primary, secondary, every school that is funded by the taxpayers of this country, the fact that every school does not have a music department, and I'm not getting into whether we should have a Berkeley and an academy post-secondary. I'm talking about why isn't every 4-year-old in Jamaica exposed to musical instruments, the craft of making music, the voice training, whatever it is. We don't know how much untapped talent we have out there, and I'm not talking about creating the next Bob Marley. I look at countries, I use the Philippines as an example, which you would be hard-pressed to name a single Filipino star. I test you here, and I know you're a treasure house of this kind of information, but you're going to be hard-pressed. But the fact is that the Philippines has several 100,000 people employed in making music. You cannot go to Asia and go into a casino, into a hotel, onto a cruise ship, and not see a Filipino band. There are more Filipino reggae bands than there are Jamaican reggae bands.
And you have them a lot on ships too.
This is the point.
The cruise ships.
They have found their niche in the entertainment industry all over Asia and other parts of the world, where chances are it will be a Filipino singer, a Filipino musician. They play everything from heavy metal background to Tony Bennett, jazz, reggae, you name it, they'll make it for you.
And the same thing in South Korea and their music industry.
Sweden, which punches far above its weight musically. People don't understand.
Yeah, people don't talk about Sweden.
But they implemented universal music training in their schools in the 1950s. And they're seeing the fruits of it, and they have seen the fruit of it. ABBA came out of that system.
Yes, and so many others. So many others now.
And as I say, it's not about the superstars. It's about finding. Well, let me start with the psychic benefit. It has been proven over and over that music training makes you do better in the other subjects.
But even the whole question of just preparation for our artists. Many of the American acts, the Korean acts, they go through intense training. You have the Mickey Mouse Club, you have all of these venues for training. Now we used to have our own conduits, Alpha Boys and
Beer Johns
and Coxon Studio and Duke Reed Studio.
But only catering to a very small segment
of society,
because many would never be exposed.
And I'm saying that maybe we should be thinking more of high schools for the performing arts.
Can I go back to what I've been saying? No different from what I've said about early childhood education and so. In Jamaica, we tend to shy away from getting the basics right. When I was a kid, a long time ago, early 1960s, shortly after independence, when I went to Bournebrook Infant School in Port Antonio, there was a school band. And I expected as a child that everywhere I would go, and all the schools I went to had musical instruments, had bands and so on. But over the years, I've lived to see, over the last 40 years, Clyde, that what should have been burgeoning and expanding has instead shrunk. Most schools in Jamaica have no music department, no music teacher.
But even when I was going to primary school, most classrooms used to have a piano.
Yes.
And the teacher would be able to play music.
Yes.
On a Fridays.
But this is my point.
On Fridays, that you would have the music class and you would sing along and all of that. And then, there was also it was Lloyd Hall.
Yeah.
When coming over the rediffusion.
Yeah.
And the ta 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 ta.
Yeah.
And you would be learning music. And then you had these bands.
Yeah.
St. Peter Claver and St. Anne's band, where many children learn music.
Yes. I only going to say yes to you. And your alma mater produced a lot of great musicians.
Oh, yes.
Across North Street.
They produce
great musicians.
Great musicians. But that hasn't been happening.
It doesn't happen enough.
Enough, no. Yes.
For some reason, when we expanded access to education, we did not expand access to music education. And it's never too late to start. But I put it out there in the universe again, Clyde, because it seems so obvious to me.
But you think it might seem superfluous now that we are more engineer driven than musician driven, that most people say, but we don't need to learn the music now.
No, but you see, Jamaica continues to be a huge pool of untapped talent. We don't know what is out there because in many, many instances we have never exposed our young people to it. They only hear the finished product. But can you imagine if, and the sad part about it is it has actually gotten less expensive than it was when we were children and you had to put a piano. You know what a piano costs versus
a little keyboard now.
This is the point.
Yes.
There was a time when you go into classrooms in Jamaica, in public schools, in primary schools, it might seem like an alien time. When you had the recorder class and everybody takes out the recorder and the teacher will play a few simple instruments and simple tunes and so on and so forth. It's actually cheaper today to expose kids to music training than it was 30, 40, 50 years ago. But it somehow fell out of the DNA of the Ministry of Education and in terms of our overall education policy. And I say this to say that the greater pool you create, the greater opportunities you create for our young people to find channels of expression. In a funny way, it is attached again to why our young people are attracted to a particular type of music. When we channel them, when you narrow the channels, this is almost inevitable result.
The question of not just talking about playing instruments and learning the whole business of performance, but knowing the history of the music, I think is critical because a lot of the youngsters we have today, they don't know on whose shoulders they stand. And they don't know, for example, some of the things and the methods that were employed that have created such an impact on the world. And I think it is important for our pioneers to tell their stories. And as a matter of fact, I think there is a great demand externally for that kind of storytelling. And we don't see a lot of that. You have written a book, and I see Copeland Forbes as just some
interesting stories there.
Yes, some very interesting stories there. But I think we see so many of our legends passing on, and we don't have stories about them. You have somebody like Clement Dodd. Where's the story? Where's the documentary on Clement Dodd?
I'll say this. A part of in a way, we are schizophrenic, and I'll say it this way. We talk in a particular way, but Jamaica remains a deeply conservative society. We have a deep conservative streak in us. And there is still, not on my part, not on your part, so I'm preaching to the choir here, but there is still a bit of ambivalence about making heroes out of what many Jamaicans perceive as ganja-smoking iconoclasts. We don't like rebels. I mean, we like rebels, but we don't like rebels, if you understand me.
Yeah,
we like them as long as they're on a statue on fire, but we don't want to encourage them too near.
But on that note, it is how we treat somebody like a Sister Ignatius. Sister Ignatius.
But you can't bring Sister Ignatius to the fore without bringing to
all of these rebels and madmen.
This is the point.
And when you think of, I jokingly say the mother of Jamaican music is a nun.
Yes.
Here is somebody.
Let me just, as a man who went to a Catholic school, you understand some of the.
Yes, you understand what I'm saying. And
we still have a lot of reconciliation to do in this country, But that's for another program in terms of how we reconcile all what people see as competing forces or antagonistic forces, but I see as like a rainbow. We're all under one big tent. We'll never all agree on everything. But what we have agreed on is a way of living together. And in this coming together and living together, we have created some really wonderful cultural things.
No, and when you're talking about the the split personality, national personality that we have, Wayne, and our attitude towards some of these rebels that you describe, that has affected in a significant way the investment in the music business. Now, so much so that an area which has so much potential for national development has been largely ignored by the traditional sectors of the economy, and including the state in a large way.
Well, I have long argued that, ironically, that is what may have allowed the music business to thrive, because it was for a long time informal, below the radar, outside of the gaze of the tax collector and the government bureaucrat, that it flourished because of no government involvement, rather than the other way around. Governments tend to love things, but they tend to love them to death because they're looking at revenues and how to tax and regulate and so on. No, there are both arguments, because informality also restricts how far you can go. But the state has never proven adept, agile, capable in terms of how it treats with the music business. Many years ago, a minister of government asked me what he could do for the music business. And I say, remove all the duties on all forms of recording and transmitting equipment, right down to what we used to call the ghetto blaster and so on. He said, but I can't do that. I said, you go and check the public revenue to see how much duties you're actually collecting on studio equipment, and then look at the positive. When every Jamaican can buy a mixing board, buy a piece of studio equipment, buy a microphone, whatever it is, for the same price that the American kid, the British kid, the Canadian kid can buy it for. Why are we not treating the music industry the same way that we treat the manufacturers, the farmers? We put it off aside and charge ridiculous duties on the inputs into the industry.
But I've had discussions on this program before that the business sector is also not alive to the realities in terms of income generation and revenue generation for themselves and for the Jamaican society. What would you say to that?
Perhaps because you're looking at the business sector that is used to a particular type of business, whether financial sector or manufacturing. But the fact is that if you stretch that notion of the business sector to include Rita Marley, Chris Blackwell, Copeland Forbes, as you mentioned, Robert Livingston, Cox and Dodd. Cox and Dodd should be studied in every business course in this country. There are business people, Duke Reed, but they are not considered. And it's a funny thing, because they're in the music business, they are not considered part of the business sector. But they are part of the business sector. They might not be members of the PSOJ, but they are very much businessmen. And women. I mean, there were women in there too.
You have the prevailing argument from some sectors of the society that these people in the music business are too disorganized, and therefore an interface with them from the corporate sector is problematic. What are your impressions on that kind of a...
It's hardly different anywhere else in the world. If you look at how the recording industry rose in the United States, whether it was Ahmet Ertegun, whether it was the guys who formed Stax Records, even in modern times when it has become a little bit more corporate, and the corporatizing of the American music industry is a relatively new phenomenon, if you look at it.
Mm-hmm.
But back in the early days, in the 50s and so, it was,
small timers.
Yeah, man. Colonel Tom Parker and Sun Records and people like this were no different from the
Cox
Jamaican country.
Duke.
Absolutely.
So you would say that, the levels of capitalization that might be required now to move the Jamaican music industry beyond where it is might require some injection of corporate funding.
I will take the might out of it. What I will say, there have been some attempts locally that have not gone as well as I remember there was one launched a few years ago by a young Jamaican Canadian, a relative of Beres Hammond. I won't call his name on the program. That hasn't gone as well. He was trying to put together a pool of talent to create intellectual property. It hasn't been as successful as the investors would have hoped. But by and large, Jamaican music has attracted international investment, you know. I mean, it might not be, you might not see a bond launched on Wall Street or in the city. But Jamaican music has been, I mean, I think Maxine's store is coming on.
Yes.
My good friend and partner. When Maxine was at Columbia Records 30 years ago and Supercat was brought to the global audience, when Spanish reggae was brought into the mainstream, Nando Boom, El General, and so on, she was very much at the center of that wave of bringing Jamaican dancehall to a global audience. And it was really bringing multinational corporate money into the Jamaican studio.
Yeah, but some people, and yes, foreign money did come in.
Yes, yeah.
But some would say that it would have been better had the investment been indigenous. We would have secured a greater segment of the value chain. What do you think about that?
I think Miss Pat and Chris and Randy up at VP Records will say that it was local capital that built the biggest distributor of Jamaican music in the world.
And maybe Chris Blackwell would argue
and Chris
that
would
too.
argue the same point. He said, we see it, but we don't see it.
Well, you're arguing the case. You're arguing the case beautifully. So the thing is, you do think that there could be greater levels of corporate participation, but as you have said before,
but the industry has to clean up itself. I mean, I don't think I'll say anything controversial to say here that the informality, the association with less savory business people, the industry itself, and it's not new, has made it difficult for the more conservative business types to get involved. And there's no doubt that a greater degree of formality, a greater degree of structure, some more certainty in the industry would certainly help the industry to move to another level. I'm not here to argue for as I said, the chopper lyrics and the gun lyrics. What I'm here to say is sometimes we need to open our eyes a little wide and see the flourishing of talent that we have here. The fact that it's gone in a negative direction is really partly on us, you know. But I don't think Jamaica lacks talent. I think Jamaica lacks channels.
And opportunities. I mean, when Maxine comes on, we want to talk about that period when we had that spurt of signings.
Yes.
Of Jamaican acts internationally, and how that fared eventually, because there is the concern again that perhaps we were not in as much control of our destiny as we should have been or could have been. There is the argument that the airplay was a significant factor and we did not control that, and people like Maxine had to put the artists sometimes in positions where they were making creative compromises, and they were having music that was neither fish nor fowl. Those are things that we will have to...
And we've seen it happen over and over. I won't talk about the latest examples, but I do remember Damon Dash coming and doing an album with Sizzla, and I was shocked when I heard it.
Yeah, because I remember when Damon when he and Sizzla was signed up with Roca Ware, and there was a lot of things going on at the time.
There was a lot of buzz around it.
Yes.
I wasn't as optimistic as some people, and my lack of optimism, I think, was justified. A part of the thing is that outsiders come in and they try to tame us, and I've used it in that way. And in taming us, they have lost one of the what
attracted them initially.
Absolutely.
Yes, and this is a big part of what has happened with the airplay story, because you get us as raw as ever, and then you try to sanitize us, and the big problem was that the crossover market that they were trying to appeal to didn't find favor with the products because it was not appealing to the core constituency.
That wasn't what they wanted in the first place.
And people are looking for the core for validation.
Yeah.
And if they don't see the core really moving towards it, then they're not moving.
You become just one more.
No, but you see,
We hit upon some serious dilemmas there. And I know you have lived through that, Clyde.
no. I mean, it is something that, you know, I have looked at in a number of ways, and there are what we would call structural problems that have basically prevented the music from moving ahead in the way that we want. But when going back to Copeland Forbes' book, Reggae My Life Is, when I look at a lot of the stories there, what I see is a lot of self-inflicted wounds in terms of our lack of punctuality, in terms of our disregard for people who pay their money to see us. There was a lot of that. And some of our most gifted artists were guilty of these breaches. And I think when we begin to do a comprehensive analysis of why we have not gone as far as we could have, one of the reasons is going to be those self-inflicted wounds, because we did a lot of bad things in terms of no shows, in terms of...
I suffered through it, you know. I mean, in my few ventures into show promotion, I got out very quickly because I could not deal with indiscipline.
No, and I mean, you have so many stories of people
took your money and didn't turn up,
and it left a bad taste in people's mouth, because we have to remember, you know, there were many major players that were paying attention to what was going on, the Richard Bransons of the world.
Of course.
I mean,
he came down here. People don't remember, you know, that he came before Virgin became as big as it did. He had made a ton of money off this album Tubular Bells by Mike Oldfield, and he came to Jamaica when Chris Blackwell was blowing up and Bob Marley was blowing up. He formed a parallel label. The apocryphal story is that he turned up at a hotel in New Kingston with a attaché case full of cash and signed people left, right, and center. He signed Euro, he signed
Mighty Diamonds.
you get the picture.
Yes, all of those, and things eventually went awry.
Yes.
You know, as
They produced some
they-
good music,
and
you know,
the
but
great music came out of it.
Yes,
but
not sufficient. Necessary, but not sufficient.
right, and we could talk about so many other stories.
Yeah.
You know, missed opportunities.
Yeah. The whole Frontline label was created by Richard Branson to deal with Jamaican music.
And then the informality in just in terms of you're not turning up, you get money to produce an album and nothing is there.
Yeah.
All of that, I mean, destroyed the whole thing. We're gonna take a break. When we come back on the other side after the races, we're going to be talking with Maxine Stowe. So that's another part of the story. Musically speaking, I'm here with Wayne Chen, going to the track for racing at Caymanas Park.